Welcome to the Battle Ready podcast, where we know that every single day is a battle. This show is about equipping you mentally, physically, and spiritually to win the daily battles. I want you to become totally free, whole, and powerful. It's time to step into your battles equipped and ready to win. I'm your host, Dr. Kaylee Judge. Let's get battle ready. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Battle Ready podcast. This is Dr. Kaylee, and we are moving right along through our Enneagram journey. We are on to number 6. So this is our 7th episode together. Angie and I are becoming besties. We get a one week meeting for an hour for 10 weeks. She didn't know that I was going to be her long lost sister from Chicago. But I've grown to love her, and I was actually thinking the other day, I'm like, man, if we were close, I bet we would be really good friends, because we know everything about each other. Like, all she has to do is like, hey, look up number 8, and here's my story. But yeah, so we're moving forward. It's getting more and more fun. The activity on Instagram has been cool to watch with people coming through asking questions. So make sure that you are sharing this podcast with people, and also engaging on Instagram with some of the posts that we're making. And I'll tag Angie a lot when I don't know the answer, and she'll come in and clear some things up for us. And so yeah, it's been cool and exciting. We're moving on to number 6, the loyalist, the paranoid friends of ours, the anxious and a little bit suspicious friends of ours. So Angie, hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fantastic. You know, it's for on recording day, it is the weekend of Memorial Day, and I have my 2 best friends coming into town tonight, so I'm super stoked about that. Angie is you're in Tennessee for
for graduation that actually physically happened. So that's a win for society.
Good job. Moving forward. Who knew?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Who knew we would be excited about graduation parties? I know I wouldn't have been.
I know, seriously. And it was kind of like one of those things where you feel like you're living in the Twilight Zone a little bit. So they only had so many tickets they could give out to people, understandably so. So we didn't actually get to go to the graduation, but we saw like all the graduates coming in with their masks on. I don't know if that was required or just some of them, but I was just like, because we were watching it via like internet. And so it was just interesting, but I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. My nephew got to graduate. Bravo. Like he got to turn the tassel and throw his cap up in the air. He got to do the deal. So it was all good. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Let's talk about 6s. Tell me a little bit about their backgrounds, the basics, all the fun things.
So I actually work with a lot of 6s, understandably so, because they are our Enneagram number, that their deep-rooted struggle, if you will, is anxiety. So a lot of authors that really study the Enneagram think that we might have more 6s societally than any other number. I don't know. We don't know if that's actually accurate, because obviously everybody's not taking the Enneagram and everybody's not reporting their number like they are if they get COVID. But they are the ones, so we don't know that for sure. But one reason we might have so floods of 6s that are out there is because they do struggle with anxiety. So they may be the ones that are going to counseling more so than other numbers, or seeking out guidance or coaching more than other numbers. So that may be one reason. Another reason is culturally we live in a very high anxiety, high high vigilant culture, which breeds anxiety. And so that might be another reason that there's more sixes out there than most in our culture today. But they are very anxiety prone. Now, anxiety looks different across the board. So we can also assume that sixes look different across the board. Like every six doesn't look the same. Every anxiety or anxiousness doesn't look the same. Some struggle with anxiety in certain areas. And then some are those people that literally sit on the edge of their seat thinking the sky is falling, and they see the scope of anxiety across the board. They're always asking the question, what if? I'll give you an example. My husband scores a 6 every single time, and it baffled me because I never saw my husband as an anxious person. But as I grow, even in learning daily about the Enneagram, also learning and watching him, it's interesting to see how he's very compartmentalized in the things that he gets anxious about. Doesn't get anxious necessarily about finances or COVID or our family or things like that, but he's a college basketball coach. And so his compartmentalized anxiousness, if you will, is mostly kind of centered around recruiting and getting this girl, or what's the game plan and things like that. So it's different across the board for sixes as far as that goes. Sixes are called the loyalist or the loyal guardian, and they're some of the most loyal humans on the planet. They are loyal to a fault almost. They are likable, they're prepared, they're very trustworthy because they expect the same trustworthiness from other people. They're very compassionate, fun, very supportive. That's amazing quality. We call those the redeemed qualities, or at their best. Then some of their struggles might be, they can be very hypervigilant, like I said, kind of sitting on the edge of their seat. What if? Very codependent or dependent at times, unpredictable, judgmental, paranoid. Like we said earlier, we're going to talk about those paranoid sixes. Defensive. They can get very defensive if you tell them that, why are you anxious about that? Or that's nothing to be anxious about. They don't like that. They don't like to hear that their anxiety or the things that they're anxious about are not valid. So they can be very self-defeating and very self-doubting. So they can question and doubt themselves a lot out of their anxiety. So those are some overview things of sixes that can kind of help you when kind of deciding, am I a 6? Am I a this, or what number am I?
What would you say are their basic fears and basic desires?
So their core desire is to feel safe and secure, right? So that is we can assume that is normal for a 6. Safety and security is their core desire. Their core fear is often fear itself. But like I said, my husband, for instance, that's not him. That he doesn't just fear everything out there. He's not that hyper vigilant person that sits on the edge of his seat. So he's very compartmentalized in the things that he gets anxious about. So the core fear of a 6 is being neglected, being deceived, or just feeling unsafe or unsecure in their environment or with the people that they are closest to. Those are basic fears of a 6.
When we start moving to the wings, I'm going to have you explain the wings again because everybody needs an explanation. And and then kind of explain their meanings or purposes or what they transform to.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing about a 6 too is their focus of attention. That's kind of important to understand about a 6 too, because they really hyper focus a lot of times on bad news, threats, hazards, difficulties. So just to be compassionate, just think about your 6s in your life that have walked through this season that we've been in for the last 2 months. And if you have felt like they have been distant or hypervigilant or, kind of backing away or not talking or anything like that, just we can learn to have compassion for those 6s, understanding that a lot of 6s have really struggled in this season that we've been in. And we can understand that we can extend grace in that because their focus of attention is bad news most often, just in general. So think about all of the Facebook feeds and the Instagram feed and just the media in general. That's all the focus has been, is really kind of bad news. So once again, if you're not a 6 and you don't understand that, take yourself outside of your lens and try to see what's going on in our society and our culture through the lens of a 6 or through the lens of what we're talking about right now. And you'll probably find a little bit more compassion for them than you've had potentially over the last couple months.
That's good.
Yeah. So wings are awesome. So we've talked about wings with each of the numbers, and I always like to like you said, go over the wings because there's without fail always questions about wings. So what are wings? First of all, they're always the numbers on either side of your core number. So we're talking about 6s today. So the wings are going to be the 7 and the 5. I always like to describe wings to one of two ways. Either that we can look at it as our wings are how we flavor our numbers. So when I talk about that, I kind of like to describe it as our core number, 6 today, being the core number that we're talking about, being a hard-boiled egg with no salt or pepper, right? And then our wings are our salt and pepper. Our 7 may be our pepper, our 5 may be the salt, and it's how we flavor our wings. Or if I'm talking to somebody that just really doesn't resonate with them, it's how we put layers to our personality. We're not just, our personality is not just black and white. It's how we add color. It's how we add layer. It's how we add depth to who we are. And so we have the ability or the capability to tap into both of our wings. Some of us use one wing more than the other. Some of us may rarely tap into one wing and always the other wing. But the reality is we really do have the capability of adding layer and flavor to our personality by tapping into both of our wings, which is really, it's really growth when we begin to do that, because we see the awesomeness about both of our wings and we go, man, how can I use some of this to add layer and depth to who I am and really branch out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's important to really recognize and understand, because that is, like you said, one of the biggest questions that I've been getting and seeing on through Instagram and people reaching out is, one just yesterday was, the question was, can I have 2 wings? And the answer is yes, everybody has 2 wings, but like you said, most people go towards one wing or the other. Some people have an equal balance of both of them.
Yep.
Some people don't even go into their wings. And so we want to kind of keep that in mind as well as we start kind of explaining what these wings mean. It's not bad whether you tap into it or don't tap into it or go to one place versus another place. It's just how you function and how you work and how you live. So yeah, that's good.
And I think it's important to understand that not to get rigid in that. Like I would say, I gave this example when we talked about the 4, because I'm a 4, that my nature goes to my 3 wing more often than my 5 wing. But in this season of quarantine, I really learned how to engage my 5 wing that are more introverted and more cerebral and more studious and intellectual. I've learned how to use that and add layer to my personality, even though it's not, but I don't do that naturally. So I think it's awesome to, when people don't get too rigid in, I'm a 6 with a 5 wing, and I'm not going to go to that. I'm not going to learn from my 7 wing because that's just not who I am. When really we have, like I said, we have the capability to learn from both of our wings. Now, like you said, it doesn't make it bad, one or the other, but we have that capability. So looking at the 6 with the 5 wing is going to be more introverted, because that is who 5s are. We talked about that last week. If you want to understand more about the 5, if you're a 6 and you want to understand more about the 5, go listen to that podcast. But the 6 with the 5 wing are your defenders. They're much more introverted. They're much more intellectual. They're much more cautious because 5s, like we talked about last week, are very logical. So they see things from a logical perspective. And so the 6 with a strong 5 wing that's going to really affirm their anxiousness sometimes, because they see things as very logical and they're not as apt to take those steps of faith, if you will, as a 6 with a 7 wing would be, because there's more adventure. There's more of an adventurous side to them. I would definitely say my husband is definitely not that 6 with a 5 wing. He probably taps into his 7 wing way more than he taps into his 5 wing. But they're more extroverted. They tend to take more risks. They tend to step into adventure a little bit more. They tend to be more playful and funny and not as serious and hypervigilant. And so that's very different than tapping into that introverted 5 wing.
So 6 with the 5 wing is the one that's going to be more
introverted. They're going to be more closed off. Whereas that 7 wing, that 6 that taps into that 7 wing, they're going to be more apt to step into adventure a little bit more than the ones that utilize or flavor their number strongly with the 5.
Would you say would you say a 6 that taps into either a 5 wing or a 7 wing, does either one of those help the person become less anxious and more confident?
7 is going to allow 7s, if they tap into their 7 more often than their 5, that's going to help with the anxiousness more than the 5. The 5 can struggle with anxiety and some of those same emotions also. They just often struggle alone. More often than the 6, who is more apt to reach out to. So the core number of a 5, they're going to struggle with their anxiety or their higher emotions alone more often than that core 6. But yes, that 7 wing is going to help that 6 relax more and want to take risks, have fun, be more playful, and more adventurous, more so than the 5 wing for sure.
Now, for the just straight up 6, is them being in an anxious state, is that across the board, whether you're in healthy, average, or unhealthy, or is there more of a healthy level of loyalty without the anxiety attached to that?
Yes. So the core of who they are always kind of asking the question, what if? Now, sixes that are more in the healthy space, one of the things that I work with this tool with a lot of my clients, but specifically with my sixes. So when we understand this whole idea of control versus not control, right? So we have this anxiety, regardless of what your number is. However, we are specifically talking about sixes. Everybody can struggle with anxiety to some degree. The motivation for anxiety for a six, however, is going to be most often their safety and security. So that's going to be the motivation that drives their anxiety, whereas maybe a nine's anxiety comes from just the lack of peace in their home or the lack of peace at work or whatever, because they're that peacemaker. So let's look, when we're talking about anxiety for a six, it when we dig deep into the motivation of that, we see an anxiousness about the safety or security of themselves, their job, their family, their relationships. They like to keep a very close knit group of people, and they like to, they're kind of the mother hen of their group, and they like to keep them close and secure. So with that, one of the things that I like to work with my sixes on is this, and like I said, this is across the board, and this is a tool that anyone can use, is I really like for them to understand and take any given situation that they may find themselves in, or any situation that they find themselves anxious about. I have them ask themselves, what can you control and what can you not control? So oftentimes I will give my sixes a daily assignment of waking up. If they have their quiet time, have your quiet time. If you have a morning routine, fine, have your morning routine. Then I want you to make out your control versus not control plan for the day. So what I mean by that is, what about this day, this Friday, can I control, and what can I not control? And literally write those things down. And I created a tool that you write what you can control in one circle, and you write what you can't control in another circle. Because inevitably, anxiety stems from us hyper focusing on what we can't control. Always. If you will ask yourself, what am I anxious about? Well, I'm anxious that I might get coronavirus. Okay, well, I can't completely control if I get coronavirus, but what can I control? Well, I can wear a mask, or I can stay home, or I can, there's inevitably things that we can control, and there's inevitably things that we cannot control. And so how do we focus our attention on the things that we can control? And so that is a growth tool, because here is the deal. If we make that a habit in our life of starting our day on focusing our attention on what we can control versus what we can't, then we're going to do that for, say, 30 days. And after 30 days, we've innately created a mental and emotional habit of focusing in on what we can control. And now we're in more of a productive stage of being a six than a non-productive stage of being a six.
I think that's important to go back on the part where you're like the control versus not control. I see a lot of that with my patients clinically. They come in and maybe, whether it's COVID or it's heart disease or it's cancer or it is, put a name on a diagnosis. There's people that are worried about these things, or maybe they have a genetic disposition because of their family that that they're not going to be able to, or they're going to be getting XYZ disease, whatever it is. You know, it's important to say, maybe you like mentally can't control what that stuff is, but we've got to find the things that you can control, because, you know, when it comes to your health, ultimately you are in control of all of that. So what does that take? That takes you waking up in the morning, being intentional with your day, looking at the things that you can versus can't control, obviously. But then also, like, let's look into our health, and let's really see that, you know, is working out going to give you a better chance of not getting disease? Yes. Is eating healthy going to give you a better chance of not getting disease? Yes. Let's take chiropractic. Is getting your spine adjusted and corrected and removing the interference on your nervous system, which is the central thing that controls everything in your whole entire body, is getting adjusted and removing that interference going to allow your body to express health? Yes. So there are things that we have the ability to control. So maybe you're a person that's like just on edge about your health and about all these things, and there's things that you can definitely control on a daily basis, and it doesn't come from an insurance card, it doesn't come from another friend, it doesn't come from all these other programs or anything. You know, even if you bought the most expensive, most amazing program in the whole entire world, it doesn't work until you start doing it and start taking action. And so the same thing happens when it comes to this stuff is, you know, couple episodes ago, Angie was talking about the biggest setup that we can have is the awareness. Having an awareness that we have the ability to slip into these massive anxious states, having the ability to slip into these other ways that we work and we function. What can you control, and really understanding what those things are, because it really truly, I think that is just phenomenal to go through that process, because without that process, you're going to be focusing on all the things that you can't control, and then your wheels are just going to be spinning in the mud over and over and over again, and you'll be going to bed that night like, what did I even get done? Nothing. You didn't get anything done because you're focusing on things that you couldn't even touch.
Right.
You're trying to grab for air, you don't get that. It goes away.
And that's the thing that we have to keep in mind, is what's going to put me towards a path of productivity, right? And I've just, for instance, I've struggled with depression and anxiety most of my adult life. For whatever reason, I have not been anxious as far as the disease itself. Like, I've had anxious moments about finances or anxious moments about my business or company or things like that, but the disease itself. However, I have asked myself, okay, what are things that are going to boost my immune system? Vitamin Z, I buy it from you, zinc and things like that I have said, well, while I'm not anxious about the disease itself, I am responsible for my health itself. And so that alone is something that, even though I wasn't hypervigilant about that itself, I was like, I still can take more control over this area of my life. And that puts me in a productive state of mind, which allows me to not be as anxious about the other stuff that I might be more anxious about. I always say that anxiety is a domino effect. So if I take control of one area, then that's going to be a domino effect. But if I allow anxiety to take control in one area, then that's going to be the domino effect.
Amen. I hope that set somebody free right there. Like, I just felt the chains fall off on that one.
So we have to decide what our first domino is going to be. Like, I talk about the domino effect with a lot of my clients. What is your first domino? Your first domino is going to be what dictates all the other dominoes that are going to fall. And so we have to decide what our first domino is going to be, because that's a huge predictor of everything else down the line.
That was a good little rant we just went on.
Yeah, it was.
All right, let's talk about these lines. Where are these people going when they stressed out?
So here's something that I don't know if I've completely clarified this, because typically we always talk about the stress and the growth because we're so confined on time. And gosh, you could do seminars on each of these numbers, and all of the things. But what I want people to understand is, with lines and arrows, we get to, and I say the same things with the wings, we get to learn from both of our wings if we want to, but we get to learn from the high side and the low side of where our numbers go with our lines and arrows. So what do I mean by that? When I say that a 6 exemplifies the average to unhealthy qualities of a 3 in stress, we also have the ability to learn from the high side of 3 also. It's not that we can only be self-aware of how we utilize the 3 in stress, but we can also learn from the high side of 3 as well. But that is a huge growth space, because our natural tendency is to act in those unhealthy qualities of a 3 in stress. So what does that look like? They become very competitive and arrogant. They can become feel anxious. They can take on like new projects, or stay very busy in order to not feel anxious. So they can kind of suppress their anxiety through overworking or being a workaholic or things like that. And they can become reluctant to trying new things if failure is a possibility. So we see that in a 3, because failure is such a core fear of a 3. We can also see that in a 6 in stress. So no, boss man, I don't want that project because I fear you might not come out and say, I fear that I won't be successful in that, or I can't accomplish that. But inside you're going, your mind and your heart is racing because I feel like that's maybe out of my league. So I'm going to find an excuse not to take on that project. That's them under stress. And so what we have to understand, and what I always tell people with lines and arrows is, especially with stress, is that this can be a stressful moment. So boss man comes to me and wants to give me a new project, and that feels stressful in that moment, and I act in this way. Or it can be a stressful season of life that you find yourself in, that you're really camping in this average to unhealthy space of your lines and arrows, or your unhealthy 3. So the growth that we see in 6s is really actually cool, because they go to the high side, or exemplify the healthier qualities of a 9. So the very anxious, uptight 6 learns to be relaxed and think more optimistically. They empathize with others more, so it's not so inward focused. We have to understand something about anxiety. Anxiety is very inward focused, right? So in growth, 6s are able to turn that around and be more outward focused on others and empathize with others more. And they take life less seriously. They kind of let the weights of the world fall off their shoulders, and they relax a little bit in life. And so what we need to understand about lines and arrows, just like lines and arrows are moving, the idea that lines and arrows move, we are always moving. Life is always changing, therefore we are always changing with it. Are we going to change growth? Are we going to change in the growth side of things, or are we going to change in the unhealthy or stress side of things? And that's where we have to decide what we want to do in our personal journey.
Yeah. So let's go back to the control versus not control. Is there a way to, like, let's say, oops, I realize like I'm being stressed out. How do I shift gears from moving into that 3 to getting back to your base or moving into growth. So how do you shift gears from stress to growth?
In a moment or in an instant, what we can do is we can take that practice of control versus not control. If we find ourselves in a very anxious space or a very uptight space, in a moment, or I'm sitting at my desk and I find myself, my heart starts racing, my thoughts start racing, then I can utilize a practice of going, okay, I'm going to take a 3-minute break here from whatever I'm doing. And I'm going to list out the things that I can control and the things that I can't control. And I'm going to focus in. My mama always used to say growing up, you can't think about 2 things at once, right? The brain does not focus in on multiple things at a time. If in any given moment, you are either you're thinking or stressed about one thing, which might be a domino effect of a lot of things, but we can't think or focus in on more than one thing at a time. So now I have my list of things I can and cannot control. So now I'm going to go to this list of my controllables, and I am going to make a plan. So what are the things that I can control in my day? Well, I can budget out the rest of my income for the month so that I know that we're staying in budget. Or I can, I'm anxious about anything, and I make a plan for that, those things that are controllables. Because at the end of the day, everything that falls in line with the things that I can't control, it doesn't matter how much you dwell and stew and worry, you're never going to be able to control those things.
Yeah. Good.
And so it is taking back control of the things that I do have control over. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, and we talk a lot about that in this podcast, is understanding scripture, understanding truth in those times. It's understanding, be anxious for nothing, but in everything with thanksgiving, present your requests to the Lord, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and mind forever. The cool thing about that verse that I love, think about this for a second. A 6 in growth goes to the peacemaker, the 9. Think about that verse. It encompasses all of that, right? Be anxious for nothing. I'm a 6. Be anxious for nothing, but with thanksgiving, present your request to the Lord, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. So what that verse is saying is, I know, right? So what that verse is saying is, in the high side or the growth space of a 6, you actually tap into or exemplify the peacemaker's high qualities. And so you have this strong ability to tap into God's peace, even in the midst of your worst anxiousness.
That's
which
good.
Is really, really cool when you look at this as a tool by itself, but then you start to add scripture and God's word to it, and it takes it to a whole nother level, right? And so it's laying aside the things that we cannot control, and we do have a responsibility. God doesn't say, okay, give me all the things that you can't control and then sit on your hands and do nothing and expect me to just give you peace. No, he says, lay aside your burdens and then be proactive in the things that you have control over. God, we do have a responsibility.
That's good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yep.
Okay. My favorite one is, how do we have a relationship with a 6, whether it be a friendship relationship or a spousal relationship? How do we?
Some things about being in a relationship with a 6 is this. I know I alluded to this in the very beginning, is don't make light of their anxiety. Don't feed into their anxiety, but don't make light of it. because it makes them feel as though there's something wrong with them. And nobody wants to feel like that. Nobody wants to feel like something's wrong with them. Let them talk it out. Let them listen to them. Take time to listen to their worries and anxieties, and then give them feedback. Affirm them of going, man, I bet that does make you feel anxious, and I bet that does make you feel on edge. But what are some things that we can do today that will get your mind off that and help you feel productive, like you're getting and successful? So that is really important. Listen to them. Don't judge them for their anxiety. Reassure them that everything is going to be okay. I know that makes you feel anxious, but I promise, like, everything is going to be okay. What are like 5 things that you're thankful for right now? And walk them through those things. And so reassuring them that their anxieties are valid, but then also helping them see that, 1, everything's going to be okay, and 2, they have so much to be thankful for, helping them list those things out, right? And be loyal and committed. One of the things about a 6 is I have counseled lots of 6s. I've counseled and coached lots of 6s. And without fail, 6s do not have a truckload of people in their life. They are very suspicious of people. And so when they let you into their inner circle, you're in. Like, you are in. And so don't do anything to screw it up. And that's not to say you walk on eggshells. I'm talking about just loyal. Be there for them. Let them know you're there for them. Don't be upfront and honest with them. Don't let them find out something behind their back. Things like that. Be as loyal to them as they are to you, because that is loyalty by their name is super important to them.
Now, what about if you are their spouse?
It's interesting. I was talking not too long ago with a spouse that the husband is a 3. I want to say he was a 3, and she's a 6. And that is and they've been married for a long time. Great marriage, healthy marriage, raised kids that are off at college. And that was one of the things that she said is one of the things that would frustrate her the most was that he was thinking he was doing something good. Like, it's no big deal. Like, let's just go, that's no big deal. Like, it's fine. But to her, what that communicated is my anxieties and the things that I'm anxious about aren't valid. And so here's what we need to understand. Here's something that I teach in some other therapy models that I teach is everyone wants to feel validated. Everyone. Now, validation looks different across the board, right? With everybody. However, 6s, there is a fine balance for spouses to know how to validate, but not to, play into the anxiety to where we make it bigger than it is, right? So, like I said, validate them and then walk them through, gosh, that I understand that you feel really anxious about that, but what are some things that we can do and focus on that we can control, and helping them walk through that. One thing with my husband is just listening. If and I'll often ask him, like, do you want my opinion? Like, do you want me to share my opinion before I share it? Because sometimes 6s don't want to hear your opinion. Because goes against some of the things that they're feeling, then it can kind of ruffle feathers. So I'll ask him, like, well, do you want me to share my opinion about this? And then he might say, yeah, I'd love to know your insight. Or, no, I'm just venting. So it's understanding that piece too.
Yeah. Cool. Anything that we're coming up to about 45 minutes, an hour. Anything else you want to wrap up with the sixes in our tiny little snippet of a inside view of a six?
I would say this, regardless of what kind of anxiety you struggle with as a six, we understand that anxiety itself looks ahead, right? It is looking ahead into the future, because that's typically what causes us anxiety, right? Is unknown. And the future is what's unknown, right? And so one of the things that's really, really important is mindfulness and understanding how to stay in the moment, or understanding how to be present. So when we're present in what's going on right now and not thinking about tomorrow or the next day or the next day, then we can focus in on being productive mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically when we can be present and mindful. And I think that one of the verses that comes to mind to me that is so prophetic, I feel like, in understanding that we as a human condition would struggle with anxiety, is that scripture says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So what that says to me is that as the seasons of life change and we struggle with this anxiousness because of the ever-changing things of life, that there is always one constant. There's no other constants that we're assured of in this life, but the fact that God says, I am the same, regardless of your circumstances and the ebbs and flows of life, regardless of your circumstances and regardless of the day-to-day anxiousness that you will struggle with. I am the same yesterday, today, and forever, never changing. And so as believers, we have to focus in on that, especially as six believers. You have to focus in on being present today, understanding that God has already been in the tomorrows.
I just love it when you speak scripture to us. It's the best.
That's my fave.
I know. All right, so we are going to wrap up the sixes. Sixes, know that we love you and we see you and that you are known, and that we love you for every which way that you go, no matter what it is. We next week we're going to be talking about the sevens. Make sure you look up in our Instagram page, in the Instagram page of Battle Ready Co. And I'm going to be posting some stuff on you sixes to help you and your loved ones figure you out. And look up Angie too. You can look on her. It's Kairos Coaching with Kairos Koaching. I hope you know how hard that is for me to spell out loud. So you're welcome.
You did awesome.
If you didn't catch it, it's in the show notes. You can go and click on that. And so is her website, so you can connect with her. If you want to figure out how to make your life more battle ready and figure out what that means, I'm still holding a discovery calls for anybody that calls in from the podcast. And we work through mindset, we work through spiritual stuff, we work through fitness and body and food. So our biggest thing with Battle Ready is renewing your mind, refining your body, and refreshing your spirit so that you can be battle ready. And if you want to do that, text the word battle to 33777. That is battle to 33777. And just hook up with us on Instagram. I love the feedback. Love to hear what you guys have to say. And Angie is always around the corner to answer any questions that we have. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. Share this, send it out, tag us, do something so we can see you on the social media World Wide Web. Talk to you soon. Love you guys. Peace out.